Merkel and Councilman Will. And as always, we begin our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you're able, please stand and join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I have our logo, the city logo. Duly noted. So the first item up on our agenda this evening is presentations and proclamations. And we do have a proclamation here this evening for Arbor Day 2023. It's on. Alex. So for those of you that may not be aware, here is David Shostak, and he's our city arborist. And I'll let him talk a little bit about Arbor Day for us, if you don't mind. I'll read the proclamation.
Yeah, I didn't know what order we were doing. I brought this so I'd remember. So this year, we're doing Arbor Day this coming weekend. It is the 4th of March, and it's at 10 o'clock a.m. And we are going to be meeting at the community gardens at Wills Park. These are located off of Wills Road near the basketball courts, if you know the area. And we're going to be planting one tree. And then we basically said, hey, come out, enjoy yourself, go visit Wills Park, walk around. There's an arboretum, there's trails, there's a whole lot of other stuff there to enjoy. So come on out, say hi. You probably won't get your hands dirty, but you can at least come and watch.
Thank you, sir. So I'll read the proclamation by the Mayor and Council of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, Arbor Day 2023. Whereas the first Arbor Day was celebrated in 1872 in Nebraska as a special day for planting trees and has grown to thousands of celebrations in communities across our nation each year. And whereas community partners, families, and friends will be joined together at local Arbor Day ceremonies to recognize the benefits of trees and urban forests, and whereas trees will be planted across the United States, creating a lasting legacy for future generations, and where planted, may that area be a source of joy and spiritual renewal. And whereas trees improve water quality, reduce the erosion of precious topsoil, increase property values and economic vitality in business areas, provide shade, cleanse the air, create habitat for wildlife, and add beauty to communities. And whereas trees promote outdoor recreation, which improves human health and well-being, and reduces nature deficit disorder in children by encouraging more activity in connection to the natural world. And whereas all of Alpharetta benefits from trees and urban forestry, which contributes to the local economy and enjoyment of the outdoors. Now, therefore, we, the Mayor and City Council of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, do hereby proclaim March 4th, 2023 as Arbor Day in the City of Alpharetta, and urge all citizens to plant trees to promote the well-being of present and future generations, and thus support our city's beautification and forestry program for years to come. So proclaim this 27th day of February 2023 by the Mayor and City Council of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia. Mr. Shostak, I'll present this to you, and hopefully you'll share this with the Natural Resources Commission.
I will. All right. Thank you very much.
So next up on our agenda this evening is the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of item A, council meeting minutes for the meeting of February 6, 2023. Item B is council meeting minutes from the meeting of February 20th, 2023. Item C is settlement opt-in, national opioid settlements with Teva, Allergan, CVS, Walgreens, and Walmart. Item D is the alcohol beverage license application, PH-23-AB-02 RNR, RCMH, LLC, DBA Rock and Roll Sushi. Is there anyone who would like to remove anything from the consent agenda this evening? Seeing none, do I have a motion from council?
Motion to approve.
I'll say that was Councilman Mitchell by a hair.
I'll second his motion.
Okay. Councilman Mitchell made the motion. All those in favor? Oh. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards on the consent agenda?
We do not, sir.
It's been so long since you were up here, I almost forgot to go to you this time. Just teasing.
Glad to be back.
Seeing none from the public, we'll go ahead and call for a motion for the consent agenda.
There's a
Thank
motion
you.
on the floor.
Forgot to go. All those in favor, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote accordingly. Councilman Mitchell, and it does pass unanimously. So now we'll move on to the public hearing portion of tonight's meeting, and the first item under public hearing is PH-23-02, Unified Development Code, UDC text amendments, procedures to establish a residential infill overlay district. Since Director Cook is standing, I assume she will be presenting this evening. Please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The public hearing item before you is to establish procedures to establish a residential infill overlay district. This is not, of course, establishing an overlay district, just the procedures to establish one. And it's in order to recognize particular needs of an existing neighborhood where there's not an HOA present. So this would not apply if there's an existing HOA. We're recommending that procedures be established for an application to be considered. An overlay district can help preserve specific characteristics of a neighborhood with specific zoning regulations and design guidelines. If you remember, we just went through an overlay just a few months ago where we really listened to what the residents were requesting for that particular development, and it was specific needs for that particular subdivision. We're proposing procedures to establish a residential overlay district. They would propose an initial 30% threshold of real property owners that in support of the overlay, and that would be for staff to start the analysis. If we receive the 30%, then we would have additional meetings with the entire neighborhood, which would be a legally platted final plat for the neighborhood where we would contact all property owners once we receive that 30% to have additional discussions. A 75% threshold of real property owners in support is proposed prior to City Council adoption of the overlay. And this is something that we already do for speed humps. If you think about prior to acceptance of having speed humps within a neighborhood, you have to have 75% of the property owners in favor. The intent, of course, of the procedures is to provide a process to establish a residential infill overlay where there is support among a majority of property owners. So this is not something that the city would initiate. This is if a neighborhood wants to initiate, these would be establishing those procedures. And we added those to the supplemental procedures section of the Unified Development Code. And A talks about there's a petition that's prepared by community development that they would complete. And then B talks about the requirements for the beginning with the 30% of the property owners in order to get that started. C is the application forms must be accompanied by a boundary map and a complete list of each property located in the residential infill overlay district by street address or tax parcel ID. All applications must be accompanied by a written description of why the particular properties qualify for a residential infill overlay district designation. And the written description shall include an analysis of all the following criteria. We listed 2 criteria. 1, whether the built environment of a neighborhood and its location, size, or age is one in which it is desirable to ensure that new and remodeled single-family dwellings and related accessory uses and structures are compatible with the height, size, and level of forestation of the existing dwellings and lots. And 2, where there is a need to establish and maintain a balance between preserving the character of a mature neighborhood while accommodating compatible new residential developments. Then D talks about requirements prior to the public hearing of 75% of the property owners have voted in favor. Of course, there would be a public hearing. There's also the opportunity for the other 25% that haven't signed to also voice concerns. So the 75% is not a given that it's adopted, but that's something that should be accomplished prior to the public hearing. E, the staff of the Community Development Department shall conduct a site inspection on all complete applications for a residential infill overlay designation, investigate, prepare an analysis of such application, of course, present that for consideration. And then F, in addition to all other applicable standards and criteria, the Planning Commission and City Council shall consider whether the property at issue satisfies the criteria. And if also, this item was heard at the February 3rd Planning Commission meeting, and there was no public comments. The Planning Commission requested that clarifications be made to the proposed regulations to specify that the residential infill overlay applies to non-HOA neighborhoods. And after discussion, they did recommend unanimously approval to the Mayor and City Council. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer those.
Do we have any questions for Director Cook? Councilman Binder.
Director Cook, as far as the size, is there a minimum size or a maximum size for an overlay?
No, so it would have to be a platted subdivision, so the final plats are legal. But we have some that are maybe only 7 homes within a final plat, but we have not established a minimum size.
Okay, and then that would lead to my next question. So there could be no gerrymandering of, it would have to be the entire neighborhood, right? Not just a section that, they have the percentage to be approved of this, right?
Yeah, it would be 75% of the ownership within that legally platted development.
But any overlay would have to be an entire neighborhood, not a fractional share of a neighborhood.
That's correct.
Okay, and it has to have that 75% threshold to come before council.
That's correct.
Okay.
They should have that prior to the public hearing.
It makes sense. It's good guardrails, and it gives a good procedure for neighborhoods that want to protect how their neighborhood evolves. So I think it's good.
Any other questions for Director Cook? Thank you, Ms. Cook. Ms. Tracy, do you need to read the ordinance?
Let me get back to my correct screen.
You didn't think I'd remember to ask, did you?
This is an ordinance by the Mayor and Council of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, to amend Article 2 of the Unified Development Code of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, to add regulations pertaining to procedures to establish a residential infill overlay district, to repeal conflicting ordinances, and for other purposes.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
However, if anyone would like to come forward and speak on this matter, now's your chance. Seeing none. Now's your opportunity, please. That's quite all right.
And if you'll just come forward to the podium, and if this is your first time at a council meeting, welcome. And if you'll just state your first and last name and your home address into the microphone at the podium.
And please try to keep your comments to 3 minutes, okay? We don't have a crowd today, but sometimes we often have a crowd, so.
Okay. My name is Mary Deadweiler. I'm at 170, huh? Okay, 170 Shady Grove Lane, Alpharetta, Georgia. Anything else? Okay, so my neighborhood is kind of in the position of creating a petition right now. And so, Kathy, I don't understand. It sounds like the petition that we're creating right now wouldn't actually work, that we have to do something with the community development.
So just so you understand, you've got about 3 minutes just to make your comments. So if you have questions, if you'll just refer to the questions, then we'll try to have staff respond to those when you've made your comments, okay? Just to keep us from back and forth, it can,
Sorry, I've not done this before. So.
no need to apologize. That's why I'm explaining. I'm glad you joined us
Okay.
this evening.
So, like, there are different steps we have to follow, and I'm following some of those steps because I have talked to staff about that. But there are a lot more steps that I wasn't aware of. So what does it do with what I've already put a lot of energy into a petition and going around the neighborhood, and I'm working on signatures, I'm working on the 30%. I think what Kathy was presenting was there's more steps involved than just that, and I just need to know about that. And then my next question is, we have a neighborhood that has a lot of builders already that have purchased property. So the 75-25%, at this point, we didn't know, what type of restrictions that we could even do. Most neighbors thought that there's nothing that we can do. So I know by talking to Kathy, she says, yes, this is what you can do since we don't have an HOA to restrict certain type of building styles in our neighborhood. So, but at this point, we have a lot of houses that have gone up and a lot of houses that have been purchased by builders that might already have got permits. And so at what point do I know we might not be able to ever reach the 75% because the builders might be 30% in our neighborhood right now. So those are my two statements.
Great, thank you. And so I'll respond just in general, and then I'll allow Kathy to explain what she can in further detail. Understand that what we're doing tonight is the first reading, so this isn't even in place yet.
Okay.
So we have to have 2 public hearings. This is the first. Assuming council passes this evening, we'll come back and have a second public hearing for the second reading. So there is nothing in place now. You're already ahead of the game because Ms. Cook must have explained what she was proposing, and I'm assuming that what you're doing is contingent upon us passing this over the next few weeks. So I'll let you draw your conclusions about that. So what you're working toward doesn't exist right yet. So there's no way to have...
I don't have to do a petition now? Is that
Well, you can go ahead and collect signatures, but I'm just telling you, this doesn't exist yet. So it's not like there's something in place that you can prevent people from buying and selling those homes or exclude potential investors or developers or anything like that.
Okay.
Because it doesn't exist.
Well, our intent is not to stop people from selling or buying homes in our neighborhood.
Right.
It's to restrict certain architectural styles that don't belong in our neighborhood. They don't match what's going on. They don't.
I understand.
Okay.
So I'm just explaining, though, that there's nothing in place now that's going to prevent anything. It just, we have to get through this process, okay?
Okay. Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy, is there anything you'd like to explain from the questions that she had?
Yes, I think there's a lot of red on that screen, but that's for staff. So a lot of it is staff analysis and what staff will do once we receive a petition with the 30%. So a lot of those things that are listed there are for staff, not for the actual submittal.
Councilman Binder?
In regards to the question about the hitting that 30% and 70% threshold and developers or non-residents not having the vote, can you speak a little bit to that?
Well, when we looked at other, surrounding counties, cities that had established the procedures for putting together overlay, they all started with this 30%, some of them were 25%, and then some of them were anywhere from 55% to 75% with the final number. We looked at what's typical for Alpharetta, and typical for Alpharetta and other procedures is 75%, so that's why we had looked at the 75%. Now, I haven't counted how many homes within that particular neighborhood of the 100% ownership have actually now private development. So I couldn't really answer.
Sorry, but the votes have to be owner occupied?
Property owners.
Property owners.
Yes, owner occupied.
Okay.
Hold on, we need to clarify that.
Owner occupied,
Did I not?
as opposed to owner investor or owner tenant? I mean, I appreciate it.
Let me find the section that clarifies. It says property owners. Yes, it does. So it would just be the property owner. So you're correct. If it had a developer, they would be listed as the property owner until it's sold to an individual.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and just so everybody in the public understands, the challenge here is that we want to make sure that we're giving the overwhelming population in a neighborhood the right to control, to a certain extent, the architectural features and designs and things like that. However, we want to make sure we're not violating the rights of those people in the minority, because they may feel adamant. There is no HOA here, and people moved into a lot of these neighborhoods because they didn't want to be in an HOA. And I've already received comments from people who are homeowners who live in neighborhoods that don't have an HOA, and they do not want to be incorporated into these types of HOA organizations. So it's a very delicate balance, and that's why we're having these public hearings. Any other questions from council? Thank you, Ms. Cook. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, Mayor, make a motion, I gotta get back to my page. Make a motion that council approve PH 23-02 Unified Development Code text amendments, procedures to establish a residential infill overlay district, and the ordinance as read by our city attorney.
Okay. Have a motion by Councilman Hypes, second by Councilman Mitchell. Any discussion? Councilman Hypes?
I find it's an interesting ordinance, but I'm thinking it strikes the right balance. I too would want to err on the side of protecting minority homeowner rights versus the majority that want to change to have some sort of continuity. And I think 75-25 strikes a good balance. And, people who have moved in either to occupy a house and have been there for 20 years and they want their future to be in a particular way, or it can be an investor home, and it could be somebody's sole source of retirement income, but where they own one house in a neighborhood, and that's rental income is their source of income. And so that distinction to me is less relevant than the people who are the actual property owners making the decisions, because they have skin in the game. They're the ones who have the equity or owe the mortgage or rely upon the rental income. So I think I appreciate what Director Cook and the department's done in terms of studying that to get the right balance there.
Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you. I know it's always a balance between home ownership and them having the right, which is protected both federally and by state. I've got to tell you, though, it bothers me that one developer can come in and build total modern homes or some particular style, Frank Lloyd Wright, and all the rest of the neighborhood is local vernacular or built over time, that kind of thing. And they have more weight, even though they're not occupying the home. So I don't know. I would like for us to look at that, at least consider it before the second reading. There's something about that seems unfair to the residents who have been there forever and that are owner occupied. Just my thoughts on that.
Any other, Councilman Binder?
I think it's a good start and appreciative of the effort. So anytime that we can know the rules going in for us as council members and then our residents, it's real helpful, and the overlays have been generally helpful. One thing I would ask Director Cook is during the second reading or before, maybe go over how we're helping protect our homeowners with things like stormwater and things like that overall, to set the ground rules regardless if it's an overlay or not, to protect homeowners there. And that's one of my key areas of concerns there. But the overlay is more going into the look and feel of the trees surrounding the neighborhood, the architectural style, and whatnot. So maybe during that second presentation, you can go over that.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion to approve PH-23-02 as outlined by Councilman Hypes, vote yes, otherwise vote accordingly. And it does pass unanimously. So that'll wrap up the public hearing portion of this evening. We'll move on to old business. First item under old business is the ordinance for the fiscal year 2023 mid-year budget amendment. This is the second reading. First reading occurred on February 20th, 2023. Director
Mayor,
Harris?
you want me to go ahead and read that now?
Please,
All
while
right.
Director Harris saunters up to the podium.
This is an ordinance by the mayor and council of the city of Alpharetta, Georgia, to adopt a mid-year fiscal 2023 budget for certain funds of the city of Alpharetta, Georgia, appropriating the amount shown in each budget as expenditures, adopting the item of revenue anticipation, prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations, and prohibiting expenditures to exceed actual funding available.
Director Harris?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is the second reading of the ordinance amending the 2023 fiscal year budget. There's actually only two fiscal impact adjustments to the first reading that was discussed at the first reading. It was the email encryption. It was a discussion about the subscription period, whether or not we could shorten it so that we don't have to, because the year ends at June 30th, and IT was able to do that and get that from $12,000 to $4,800. And then there was a discussion about the revenues that the community agricultural operational budget, the Ag Venture program, and recognized the revenues that program was going to bring forward, and that was $21,000 of additional funding, bringing the net funding down to $21,828. So those are the only adjustments to the item since the first reading.
Any questions for Director Harris?
Mr. Mayor, if I could just weigh in addition to what Mr. Harris just presented, there is still some continuing questions on the Pulse Point software. Councilmember Will is not here, but as a liaison to that department, he's asked that we postpone approval of that and continue to study it. The chief and I don't object to that, and so In addition to what Mr. Harris recommended, I would request that you remove the Pulse Point software from the E911 fund and let us continue to study that and, if appropriate, bring it forward consistent with the fiscal year 24 budget.
Any questions from council about that change? Thank you, gentlemen. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards?
No, Mr. Mayor, we do not.
However, if anyone would like to come forward and speak on this budget item, now's your chance. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir. I move that we approve the ordinance to adopt a mid-year fiscal 2023 budget for certain funds of the city of Alpharetta, Georgia, appropriating the amounts shown in each budget as expenditures, adopting the items of revenue, anticipation, prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations, and prohibiting expenditures to exceed actual funding available. You got to quit having the accountants write this down.
We have a motion by Councilman Binder. Do we have a second? Second. Have a motion by Councilman Binder, a second by Councilman Mitchell. And that, I just wanted to clarify, does that incorporate the change that was proposed by?
I don't really get what Councilmember Will's asking, but if anybody wants to throw a friendly amendment,
I'll make a friendly amendment that it would be the motion as presented, backing out from the proposed mid-year adjustments, the Pulse Point software request of $10,500.
Councilman Binder, Councilman Mitchell? Okay. So that was a motion to approve the ordinance as outlined by Councilman Binder, including the removal of the Pulse Point item. Everyone clear on the motion? All those in favor, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no. And it does pass unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Harris. So that'll wrap up old business, and we'll start off with the new business. First item is Local Road Safety Action Plan and award of RFQ 23-1001. Mr. Sisevich, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you tonight is the award of a Local Road Safety Action Plan. This is in conjunction with going after a grant associated with the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. Part of the infrastructure bill, there's approximately $5 billion of grants, and the step one is you have to have a Local Road Safety Action Plan adopted by Mayor and Council before you go after implementation funds. And so we went out for a RFQ and an RFP process with Alta Planning became the top firm. Not only were they the top rated firm for the proposal, they were also the lowest price as well. And we were requesting $199,778 to be awarded to Alta, and included in that dollar amount is about over $30,000 to assist us with going after grants associated with the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program.
Thanks, sir. Any questions for Director Sisevich? Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
However, if anyone would like to come forward, now's your chance. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, Mayor. Move to approve the award of RFQ 23-1001 to Alta. Approve developing the safety action plan for Alta in the amount not to exceed $199,778 and authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. Have a second by Councilman Heitz, motion by Councilman Dorito. And that was to approve Local Roads Safety Action Plan and award of RFQ 23-1001 as outlined by Councilman Dorito. Any discussion? All those in favor, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote accordingly. And it does pass unanimously.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you, Pete. Next item under new business is the Memorandum of Understanding, Faithful Guardian and City of Alpharetta. Director Robinson, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I mentioned at our council retreat, our plan this spring to have our first fire academy, where we're going to be hiring some non-certified fire candidates, 6. And so a part of that is getting them connected with a local EMT program so they can get their EMT certification, and that is Faithful Guardian. So we're asking tonight for permission to move forward with an MOU with Faithful Guardian to provide EMT training for 6 of our fire candidates.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Director Robinson? Well done, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
However, if anyone would like to come forward and speak on Faithful Garden, now is your chance. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that council approve the collaborative agreement between the City of Alpharetta and Faithful Guardian LLC, and to authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents.
Second.
Have a motion by Councilman Height, second by Councilman Dorito for the Memorandum of Understanding, Faithful Guardian and City of Alpharetta, as outlined by Councilman Height in his motion. Any discussion? All those in favor, please vote yes, otherwise vote no. And it does pass unanimously. So we have a few workshop items now that we've wrapped up new business. And the first workshop item is the presentation of the Alpha Loop Downtown Link Plan. Director Cook.
Thank you, Mayor. The Alpharetta, of course, has continued to experience high-quality growth, especially around the Alpha Loop, and downtown is the area that we wanted to look at to make sure that as we approve new development, talk to different developers that are coming into the downtown, that we've established a clear, cohesive, comprehensive trail system to continue the Alpha Loop. And then secondly, the reason we're bringing this forward is I had spoke actually to Morgan and Pete last year and said, how can we work together on the Alpha Loop? They said, well, get a loop. Try to find an actual loop that's going to be completed. And looking at the downtown, we just have a lot of different requests coming in, so we want to make sure we put a plan in place so that, number one, we have opportunities to apply for grant, but we also have opportunities to work with the development community to make that happen. So tonight I have with me our on-call consultant, Star Whitehouse, that put together the plan, Jacob and Jenny, and they're going to go through that plan workshop to get comments before it comes back to you for adoption.
Thank you, Director Cook. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Very excited to be here and present to you 6 to 8 months of work that we've conducted primarily over the second half of 2022. As Director Cook mentioned, we are looking specifically at what we're calling the downtown link. So I'll start by putting it into the context of the broader Alpha Loop system. So generally speaking, there's the outer loop, the inner loop, and this would be another loop around the downtown. So maybe we'll start calling it the Alpha Loops. But what we find interesting about this particular section is it really is where a lot of development has been occurring and continues to occur, and it seems, at least to us, as though every developer in this area wants a piece of the Alpha Loop. And so what this study really aims at doing is lending legibility and cohesiveness to it. We certainly want to encourage them to continue to build it out, but as a city and being primarily within the public realm, we want it to be distinctive to Alpharetta generally and to downtown Alpharetta specifically. So really all of this is one slide that's going to capture the first probably 3 months of our work, which is in-depth analysis. Won't bore you with all of it, but we looked at physiographic constraints. We had a traffic report and traffic analysis done, particularly at some of the major intersections that the trail would be crossing. We looked at topography, tree cover, all of the things to help deliver to us what we thought was the preferred alignment. So looking at the preferred alignment, I'm not going to stick on this slide for too long because we'll dig into the details of it. But really, this isn't the creation of a complete loop. A lot of the loop is already created, and that's represented in the thinner orange line there. The portions that we have focused on are these bolder orange lines which connect those interstitial pieces together. The yellow lines throughout are alternative routes that we assessed and looked at and evaluated, and ultimately decided were not the best path forward. Those include some that were from the original planning document as well as others that we thought had value going in before we had all the answers from our analysis. So the remainder of I'm going to go through this in detail, and it's going to be broken into sort of 3 general categories. The first being trail standards, kind of your typical condition. It's a linear piece of infrastructure, and so a lot of it can just be standardized along the way. The second portion will be looking at some of these major intersections where pedestrian safety improvements were quite important. Traffic numbers were quite important to really figure out how to get across those in the safest and most efficient way possible. And then the third, we'll look at a couple focus areas, opportunities for enhanced placemaking, areas where we can go a little bit above and beyond the standard conditions and really help drive future development, as well as continue to make Alpharetta such a dynamic place to be. So getting into the design standards, really these are about creating that cohesive, legible transportation network. Going to dig into the weeds a little bit here at the outset just to put the rest of the images in context. We've done quite a bit of material research and put together these loose standards. This is a planning document. It's a living document, so it's not to say that any group that comes in and develops these as capital improvements needs to use these, but they give sort of a picture that picks up not only on resilient materials, but also the character of the materiality that we see downtown, outside of City Hall, so on and so forth. So the primary material of the trail is going to be cast-in-place concrete. It's resilient. It's great for biking, great for walking, so no need to invent the wheel there. Because this is downtown, there's a little elevated design influence, and so we've been looking at the double brick header that you see outside of City Hall and the pedestrian realm, as well as along the first phase of Thompson, first phase of the Alpha Loop along Thompson, to really lend that cohesiveness, give a little bit extra detail. And then these other materials are either used specifically within the focus area, so the concrete cobble and the precast concrete bricks, so I'll get into that later. And then the bottom row are really sort of for pedestrian safety, ADA accessibility, and with the granite block sets for specifically within planting strips around trees where they are in conjunction with parallel parking. So these are the typical trail plans here. Like I said, these could be applied to probably around 75% of the area that we've been working. So 12-foot trail that includes the double brick header on each side. And then because we are working within the right-of-way, and one of our goals was to limit right-of-way acquisition, really our tolerance.
If I could pause you while we're looking at this right
Yeah,
quick.
sure.
This is a workshop, so if we have questions along the way, we might as well bring them up while we're talking about that. My concern with the double brick headers is the challenges we're having with the existing double brick headers because they don't stay in place. So is that contemplated as one of the recommended?
Yeah, sure. So we've spoken with Pete and his team about this as well, and are aware of the issue. So there's a couple options there in terms of the detailing of it, which goes a little beyond the scope of our planning study. But what we would recommend is either a concrete curb that would hold those in. You could do that with a slump curb, so it's tapering away, and it's not as visually heavy as sort of your typical curb. You could also do it with a steel paver edge. That's obviously going to be a little problematic when it comes to mowing and mower decks kind of hitting it and bending it. And so there are options there, but we are aware of that maintenance issue, and so that is one thing that will require additional research and detailing as any portion of this would go into implementation.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we were thinking practically as well as strategically. Okay, thank you.
So the planting strip there is really where our tolerances are for available right-of-way. We've prioritized a 12-foot trail. There's a lot of pedestrian connectivity through downtown. It continues to get better. More sidewalks are implemented, but this is the Alpha Loop. This is something entirely different, and so we want it to operate like a multi-use trail. Ultimately can become not only a recreational asset, but a transportation asset for the city. Yeah, please.
So as you're acquiring right-of-way and trying to make things fit 12 feet, are you also, and maybe in a later slide, incorporating bollard lighting?
Yes.
Sufficient room both for laying the groundwork and physical structure?
That's right. So we have recommended you'll see in the one on the far left about midway down the planned bollard strip. So those are envisioned to be the standard bollard light that you see along some of the existing portions of the Alpha Loop. I will mention in this case, because we are largely running in parallel to existing roadways, there are street lighting. And so if there isn't room or there are trade-offs that need to occur, then looking and analyzing the current light levels, I think would be a warranted exercise to determine if that additional light level would be required. I'm going to jump to the second plan here. So largely the same as the first. This is specific to where you have existing parallel parking that we're looking to retain. In general, we've tried to minimize any parking removal with this alignment. Aside from 11 spots, there are 2 on Milton at the corner of Milton and Highway 9. There's an existing brick commercial building, one of the historic buildings. It is the southwest corner of that intersection, which is right up to the property line. So in order to provide that 12 feet there and that one small stretch, we've removed 2 parallel parking spaces. There are 4 along Old Roswell, and I'll get into those a little bit later with the reason why we're removing those. And then there are 5 along Roswell Street between Marietta and Milton. South of Marietta, between Marietta and Old Milton, we have left a bank of parallel parking spaces there intact because we know the business owners across the street depend on them specifically. Further up on Marietta, it becomes a little bit more daytime office use and residential use, and there's other parking options within sort of the downtown core that can help absorb those losses. And then going back to the 2 along Milton there at the intersection of Highway 9, this plan on the far right, this is kind of distinctive to that area given that it is within that historic downtown sidewalk network that is currently brick. And so we would not propose changing that, but moving the curb out within the current parking stretch and then continuing that pavement treatment out just to stay consistent with what's happening throughout the downtown district. So longitudinal crossings along the stretch of trail, these would be driveways, business entrances. We've provided a couple different treatments for these. There are a couple instances where the driveway is currently a curb cut. So on the left side, you'll see the curb continuing. It will go down to a flush condition at the driveway entrance. The idea here is that you just carry that trail through at grade, so there's no going up and going down. We have indicated that there is a potential conflict between pedestrians, bicycles, and vehicles with a bollard and the brick header wrapping in a perpendicular fashion. And then the one on the right is a little bit more traditional crossing with the painted, the thermoplast crossing bars, but introducing that green bicycle, designated bicycle route, since this is the Alpha Loop, for a little bit additional notification to drivers. So that's going to take me to the major intersections. We'll have 3 of those. They're Roswell and Old Milton, the Roswell roundabout at DeVore, which is currently under construction, and the DeVore and Haynesbridge Road intersection. So before I get into those in detail, one thing that we've looked at, and this is kind of coming from an earlier study the city commissioned at North Point Parkway within the placemaking study, is this idea of distinctive crosswalks. we feel like it has value in terms of the Alpha Loop within kind of the dense urban environment, just to give that sort of legibility and indication that something else is happening here. There are other types of traffic flows. Yes.
I continue to be surprised because I use the Alpha Loop so much that people will come up to me and say, oh, I just found out that the Alpha Loop runs over here behind the library. But I feel like the city's done a good job with that crosswalk of creating something that says Alpha Loop. And to the extent a lot of this design incorporates what was formerly sidewalk and not trail, I would be rather hopeful that we have some sort of consistency as opposed to different artistic impressions, but something that everybody agrees upon, says this is the Alpha Loop and not someplace else in the city. Because again, it's curious to me that people who've lived downtown for quite some time said, oh, I just discovered the Alpha Loop. Well, it's been there for a few years. So,
Yeah.
and, so anyway, it's a workshop, and I would be in favor of something with some consistency.
Okay, great. I think that's a great point. And what we're showing here is one option that would lend consistency, the other that would be distinctive to each individual intersection and might allow an opportunity for a public art overlay. So I'll go into the first, which lends consistency, which really stays within industry standard materials and applications with the thermoplast, or another product that we've been researching, MMA. I won't begin to tell you what that stands for. It has methyl in it. That's all I know. And so this would be an opportunity to really put the logo in and kind of in a creative way to demonstrate that it's not just any old crosswalk. And I think the images on the right, while they're much more distinctive, do a good job of just showing sort of visually how that would be enacted, to where, particularly the one on the bottom right, where you have one standard crosswalk and then the other that is highlighted. So we're not necessarily suggesting that these are the designs that should be implemented, but one option that we had talked about with Director Cook and her team is, could we bring in a local arts organization and kind of have an RFP for local artists to design something for each specific location that says something about that location or Alpharetta in general. Other options that we've looked at are that crossing across behind the library going to the Thompson Street stretch, which is a unit paver. I know that was our initial recommendation, but I know it's been a real nightmare to maintain those in the vehicular realm specifically because of that additional traffic loading. And so we kind of moved away from that early on. There is an opportunity, perhaps, if the city would like to go this way, is to do a cast-in-place concrete, either with an integral color and kind of an etched alpha loop medallion, or even stamp that concrete to make it feel like a unit paver, both of which would be much more resilient. Yes.
Yeah, I had noticed that on a previous slide. That looked really good and kind of tasteful. And another question is, are you able to go with a thermoplast over the concrete, newly poured concrete, like in a green, that would further distinguish the Alpha Loop?
Yes, you could, and you're always going to have to replace it over time just because it wears away. It's a surface treatment, but yes, that is an option.
Okay, thank you.
Unless there's any other questions about that, I'll get into the individual intersections. Okay, so we'll start here at Roswell and Old Milton. Old Milton, of course, currently 6 lanes, 3 in both directions with dedicated rights and lefts. Roswell Street, much calmer, 2 lanes with, I think, a dedicated right here going north and a dedicated left going to the east. And then, of course, the context sensitivity here is that we have Wills Park. In our traffic analysis, we saw in PM peak, we had an average of 250 pedestrian trips across this on an average day. We think that's likely because of the park and then the schools to the north. perhaps, and having that asset there was very important in terms of our recommendations. And really that is finding the best way to cross two roads, because we did want the Alpha Loop to be on the Wills Park side, not only to connect people directly into the park and this open space asset, but you have a significant amount of city-owned land there in order to implement an Alpha Loop with a little bit more straightforward right-of-way processes. On the other side of the road with the Zaxby's, it gets very tight to where we would even be impacting one of their parking spaces, in which case we said, yeah, we're not going to proceed with that. So the second big move we made here was crossing north-south across Old Milton. So we don't have the existing condition shown here, but you'll notice on that eastbound stretch, you'll see one dedicated left, one straight through lane, and then a right left. Currently, there is a dedicated right that is separated by a little median, a little triangle median. Our traffic analysis suggested that we would not have any adverse impact on traffic flows should we remove that dedicated right. And so in order to provide a shorter distance for pedestrian and bicyclists to cross Old Milton, we have removed that. The other added benefit it has is the Parks Master Plan has identified an opportunity for a Wills Park gateway at that location, and so we're increasing the amount of usable area that could be created for that gateway. Yes, sir.
I'm very familiar with this intersection, and to go north-south, the Old Milton traffic has the most of the traffic signal time. So when you're trying to be a pedestrian walking from Pure and getting over to the Zaxby side, I mean, it's a long light. And this shows the loop as having to cross twice to get there. So you're going to get the really long light coupled with, however much time you're waiting on the north-south. So is there anything in your study or design about how long is too long? Is there anything that comes with a recommendation to balance the timing of the lights through Pete where an Alpha Loop is crossing one of these streets? Is that part of your study?
So we have not given any recommendations to that effect. Our traffic engineers with Columbia Engineering have looked at it and can make some recommendations, and that would be something that we could certainly add to the report.
And I know it's further in your presentation, but the light to get across Old Milton at the post office is a really long light. If you don't catch that, you can stand there for 2.5 minutes easy.
Yeah.
And so if that's part of the Alpha Loop, that can change the experience as opposed to just walking on a sidewalk.
Right. I know we did, just to piggyback on that, we did look at the feasibility of an all red to where you'd have a scramble. And part of the reason, it became too long, started backing up traffic along there. And it's just a long stretch for pedestrians to get across there as they're moseying along if they're using it as a recreational asset as opposed to a transportation one. So we erred against that. Are there any more questions on this one? Or okay. So just to give you a quick view of what that would look like on ground level. How are we doing on time? Everybody good? Keep it going? Thank you. Roswell Street and DeVore Road, roundabout here. Basically wanted to minimize any impacts here. This is a new investment in the city. Don't want to double pay for anything there. What we are proposing is to leave the curb, leave the everything in place, but widen the sidewalk and add the addition of the pavement detail to indicate that it is the Alpha Loop and to indicate where you do have pedestrian crossings here. Moving to Haynes Bridge and DeVore Road. So this one was looking at, I know you guys saw a development on the the southwest corner parcel here, which is coming online, which will be building out a portion of the Alpha Loop along Haynes Bridge going to the south. That's part of the outer loop, and they're actually building the same 12-foot multi-use trail on the south side of DeVore. In our field analysis, that intersection at DeVore and John Scott is a problematic one in terms of a pedestrian crossing there. Divorce coming downhill as it moves to the east, and you've got people turning left off of Haynes Bridge and accelerating there, and so it becomes not only visibility concerns, but fast cars and slow people. And so what we've looked at here is to take the deceleration lane, which access the quick trip there currently, remove it, given that people are already going slow theoretically as they're turning, and put the 12-foot multi-use trail through there. And then in terms of the intersection and the crosswalks here is you will ultimately have the Alpha Loop touching all four corners. It's obviously a prominent intersection as you're coming in to downtown along Haynes Bridge. And so again, to figure out a way to make those crossings legible and to indicate those to drivers as you make that important approach into the city will be key. And then this is what it will look like on ground level, and you can see in the existing condition that deceleration lane that I noted. And then, so we'll get into the focus areas. There are two of these. The first is Kingery Lane. The second is Old Roswell Shared Street. Kingery Lane, we looked at, just to note that we looked at Park Street as a potential alignment to connect to the stormwater park there. We went away from it. It's a slightly longer. It moves you away from downtown, and it moves you away from downtown going uphill. So we weren't too thrilled about it on our walk. I don't think everyone else would be, particularly on a bike. And so we went down to Kingery. Kingery has its challenges because it's a narrow road. You have the post office there, so you're dealing with the federal government instead of just City of Alpharetta. But there are some opportunities there. And we actually have three options shown in our current report. I'm only going to show one tonight, our preferred option. All three we feel are feasible. So the two one that I won't be showing is option A on the west side, and then there's a slightly dialed back option B on the east side. So this is the preferred alternative. We've skewed the plan here a little bit, so just note that right is north, up is west. And so a enhanced crossing as you come across Old Milton with a pedestrian refuge by pulling that center median up, shortening that effective walk should the light change on you, or if you're overly ambitious with a countdown of 5. And then bumping out the curb on the south side, or excuse me, I'm going to say south, plan south, on the east side of Kingery, pulling it out. What that does, it's kind of a funky road geometry, as I'm sure you know if you've driven down it currently. So there's a right lane, there's a left lane as you're on Kingery. We have removed the dedicated left and just made it a right-left. We have the traffic analysis to support that it will not cause any backups. There's not a lot of through traffic going through there. It's mainly people leaving the post office. And so we've bumped that curb out to offer more room for the loop. We are impacting a parking lot on the side of the post office by running that trail through. So where you see the jog come in, we've actually added that parking lot back in. We were able to gain one spot from what is currently there. And then we've introduced a little pedestrian plaza there outside, whether or not post office employees have their lunch there, or it becomes a rest area along the route before you get to your next destination. And then as you move towards the phase 1 on the other side of Thompson, we've left that curb in place. That's the new portion of the road that connects through to Thompson. We're able to tuck that 12-foot trail in there, though there is a stand of trees. We would likely see some tree impacts and the requirement for a retaining wall there, given the grade changes. And then you can see it there in a bird's eye, and then at ground level. And then just to go back, an important piece. So we discovered through our project here that the city does actually have additional right-of-way there. So you see the limits of what we've rendered in green and color. That's all within the city right-of-way there. And so likely there would be additional coordination with the post office. And so that was the reason we kept our other option on the other side of the road in case that's the path with less resistance, should we say. And then finally, Old Roswell Street. The idea here is that we convert Old Roswell Street to a shared street. This was a concept that was put forth in the Downtown District Master Plan. And so we kind of took it and ran with it and overlaid it with the idea for the Alpha Loop. This is really the downtown district, so it's kind of the primary destination along the route as we see it. And so we're encouraging not only motorists and vehicular traffic, but also bicyclists and pedestrians to stop and stay a while, rather than giving them that dedicated multi-use trail. It converts to a completely shared environment where all of the modes of transportation live together harmoniously, so long as they self-regulate. And so what that means is we're removing the curbs that are currently there, raising the street grade up so it's a flush condition across. We've done some articulation with the pavements to still provide some pedestrian-only zone, and those are the areas that are represented with the maroon color there. We have a granite block strip that divides those, so it provides a textural shift. It also provides some baffling and energy dissipation of stormwater as it's running down there. And then we've introduced stormwater planters along that stretch as well for some additional green infrastructure and water quality improvements. And then within the roadway, we are looking at the precast concrete cobble paver. This is what you see in the circle out front of City Hall. And really that's driving sort of this axis that you see running to the east there, which is a direct visual connection from this alleyway to City Hall across Town Green to really tie the civic and social spaces together throughout downtown. And then you can see it there in the bird's eye, and then there on ground level. And with that, I'll stop talking and let you guys ask questions.
Any other questions? Thanks, sir.
Great, thank you.
Next workshop item is the Rucker Road Park Design Conceptual Site Plan. Director Rogers, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council. As always, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm here tonight we're here tonight to workshop the old Rucker Park Design Conceptual Master Plan. And this whole project started back in 2016 with the bond referendum when the city bought some land throughout the city. And one of the pieces of property that they bought was off of Old Rucker Road at the time. And then in May of 2021, we conducted virtual as well as on-site input meetings and online input meetings, came up with a conceptual plan, and that is what we are bringing forth tonight. This particular plan has also, we took the input to get to this plan, and then we have also did a 2-week online input from our residents. And so I'm here to talk about the plan tonight. I think it's up, should be on your screens. Just to go over it very quickly, at the bottom is Rucker Road. When we bought the property, there was no connection to Rucker Road with this property. It was off of Old Rucker, which is was a dirt road. We closed the eastern border with Old Rucker and opened up to Rucker Road. So this enhances the entrance to Rucker Road. When you turn in, if you go straight toward the eastern part of the property, it will be a 2-lane paved road to where you get to the majority of the parking on the east side. And then you'll be able to access the trails, the restrooms and the pavilions and the groves, both the Maple and the Orchard Grove there, which are Y and K on your list. there is a soft surface trail that will go around the park. Now, not the lower part, which is the wet zone over on the east side. That is a future development. Then when you come back up to where the farm is basically a 2-acre piece of property there. That is not being, not being affected by this particular master plan. And the only other thing I'll point out is that there is the soft surface trail that goes around most of the property, with the exception of from the entrance to the little maintenance shop, that will be a asphalt trail going back there, because that's where we'll be able to have our maintenance supplies and our equipment there in the back. We did workshop this particular plan with the Recreation Commission last week. They were, in general, in favor of the plan. They did ask a couple of questions about the general area, the open area, and ask us, as we move forward, to better define the children's play area, because right now we're looking at it to be a natural play area. So they wanted us to define that a little bit as we move forward, but not necessarily to stop the process of going forward. Be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Councilman Binder?
We spoke earlier, Director Rogers, and I think it's a great plan. I love what you've done and how it's evolved. The parking was an original concern when I saw previous conceptuals, and it looks like you've done a good job of just keeping it there so we can have that natural beauty. I think with keeping it as natural as possible, even with the playground equipment, we don't want any yellow or blue equipment that we've seen in other areas. My one ask, and I know I've been told no, or that it's not conducive, but seeing how we just spent quite a bit of time talking about downtown and adding quite a bit more walkability there, I would love to see a hawk signal, because there are quite a few residents who walk there, walk across the street quite a bit. So I know Pete's looking down right now, but if you could work together and see what we can, because not having one, I don't think is an option, because it's getting done, and so they're doing it, so we want to make sure that it's safe. So. Correct. On there, so across the street, because there are a lot of people using it to get to their garden plots and everything. So, can we do that?
Well, that's not within the scope of what I'm bringing forward tonight, but that would be certainly something that we will talk about and make sure that as we're, I guess, moving forward, it is a subject that I'm sure it'll come back to this group at some point in time. But
I'm asking if we can include it. It's just one thing that I've been asked time and time again, of proximity, people living there, of can we have walkability there? So I've heard it. I'm just, it's time to add it to the scope, or at least
Pete,
tell the residents why not.
you mind coming forward?
So right now, the budget that you see here that's been estimated is right at our budget dollar amount. So the good news is, if we want to have a hawk there, the engineering design firm, Columbia, they have a traffic engineering component to it. Actually, Columbia is doing North Point Parkway corridor for us. So they can design a hawk to go here. We get a change order, a cost proposal, open for a change order. I'm afraid to tell you what the dollar amount would be right now for a construction of the hawk, based off of what how volatile the market is right now and everything. But I would probably say, if you want a number, it's going to be between $250,000 and $500,000 extra. And that's just because the improvements you have to do on Rucker itself too, to get the signal, the crosswalk, the multiple mast arms, and the connectivity. So I don't think $500,000 is the high end, $250,000 would be the low end.
And whether it gets added to the project, which would make sense, or concurrent as a separate line item, I understand that those bond dollars were for the park themselves, maybe not the road and construction, but it's been a high ask, and you know it as well. And
so we'll put, we've got the capital budget process coming up forward, so we can always add that to the list of projects.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Director Rogers? Any other questions, Councilman Mitchell?
I'll just have a few comments. I know that Kathy is meeting on Farmhouse Park. She's meeting with the gentleman that owns that to discuss the parking there. So hopefully we can bring that up soon after, once she secures that parking. But concerning this, I like the green space up front on Rucker Road. I agree with Councilman Binder. There's so many homes there, and there's so many people walking on Old Rucker that Rucker Road, a hawk signal would be. That sounded a little high to me, but I don't know, cost-wise. But if we can get it worked in, and also I'm wondering on the second phase, if we could work in a trail system to connect some of those neighborhoods to the backside of the park, so that it's, the more access, the better. But this looks like a great overall plan and everything. And I'd like to welcome Jason back to council. It's good to have you back. Thank you.
Any other comments? Any questions? Thank you, Director Rogers. And we'll have the third workshop item, which is the Town Green Special Events Survey and Recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is at the retreat. Well, let's go back. When COVID hit, in 2019, right before COVID hit, we had a lot of events going on here in the city. A lot of them downtown, of course. They all took a hiatus, and then now they come back with a little bit of a vengeance, if you will. So at the retreat, City Council retreat, we were asked to do a survey about the events that are happening specifically on Town Green, which we did. And we can, I thought we'd go through those real quick. They were left, right. Okay. So the questions were real simple, as directed at the retreat. We asked what kind of businesses they were at first, as you can see there. And then we went directly into the events and asked them basically, were they positive about the events, very positive, positive, neutral, negative, or very negative? And so the first one was the farmers market. You can see there positive results. Let me flip to my notes. So if you add the very positive and positive, you get to be right at 79% of the people were in favor of that. Fitness and yoga, didn't seem like a whole lot of people knew that we were doing yoga, because that was just one evening during the week. So again, most of the comments that were made were either very positive or they didn't know about it. Then you had the city center concerts, which were Friday in May through August. Again, if you take those, the positive and the very positive, and you get 63% of the people like those. And there are comments about each of these that you can see. Taste of Alpharetta, again at 61%, positive or very positive. Seemed like there were more comments about Taste of Alpharetta than were any of the other events listed in there. Then the Mother's Day event, again, not a lot of people knew that happened on Sunday. But again, the comments that we got were either very positive or just positive. Wine Festival, again, neutral on this. Then you get to Wire and Wood, again, which is it was kind of interesting that there were a lot of people neutral about Wire and Wood. But again, if you take those two, the positive and the very positive, we were at 63% of the people were positive or very positive about that. Fit Life Expo, again on the Sunday. Not many people knew about that and didn't really have a comment about that. which is the same about the Alpharetta High School pep rally, which was on Wednesday last year for the second year. And then the season of celebration, you had those two positive and very positive. You're at 71%. Then the City Center Snow Day, Saturday the 10th, which was sponsored by City Center, not by the city. Let me go back. Yeah. So, but again, that was at almost 60% there. Positive or very positive. The menorah lighting which was the first time we did that this year. Again, most folks didn't know that, either didn't see the menorah at Town Green or didn't realize that it was happening. But again, most of the comments were positive, were very positive. And then the screen on the green was at 67% positive or very positive. And then the last one that we asked about was cornhole, 53% positive or very positive. But again, a lot of people neutral on that. So you take all of those together and you kind of bring them all together. It's most the overriding opinion is they like the events at Town Green. Really kind of no matter what the events are, they like the events at Town Green. So with that in mind, we I'll go back to the staff report. The staff is bringing forth 4 recommendations for mayor and council. One is that city center concerts should take place no more frequently than at 2 Fridays per month on Town Green, but not the same week as Food Truck Alley, which happens on Thursday, or the Home by Dark concerts that happen on Saturday. Big screen on the Town Green must be permitted. We recommend that Cornhole Atlanta should be allowed to gather and play on Town Green and the turf area on Old Roswell weekly on Wednesday evenings. And we recommend give staff the ability to permit ancillary events that do not impact the downtown business flow and operations, which would include things like the City Center Snow Day, the Wine Festival, and pedals and parasails. Be glad to answer any question that you may have about this particular report.
I don't have a question, but I would like to comment on the wine festival because I went there, but it was June and it must have been 95 degrees that day.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that's the best time for a wine festival in downtown.
And I would tell you that
Wasn't for me.
Yeah, and I would tell you that the group that put on the wine festival, they had exactly the same opinion of that as well. So I think
Bet they did.
if that event comes back, it'll probably be in the fall. That's what there's been no decisions about that. They haven't put in a formal application, but it will be in the fall if they do.
Councilman Hypes.
With respect to the big screen TV that's outdoors where people would be sitting on the Town Green, I have always been curious but have never gotten an answer. Are the sidewalks in front of the Jewel Box buildings owned by the city? Are they public sidewalks that we permit private businesses to use with our blessing? Or are they owned by someone other than the city? And I have never been able to get an answer to this question. And there is an answer to that question. I just don't know what it is. But
If I could, it might be better to ask Director Cook.
But it makes a difference in terms of, where we might want to exert ourselves about how events are being handled.
I'm sorry, you'll have to ask me the question again, sorry.
I don't know if you know the answer, but in front of both of the Jewel Box buildings out here, there's table seating, and I think it's great. But in terms of ownership, and can those businesses do whatever they want, because it says in our packet they take place on private property, I don't know if this belongs in the packet as a statement by the city, because I don't know that those are. I sat in these hearings before I was on council, and I remember discussion about the sidewalks.
So they do have a small area that is theirs. It's just probably maybe 4 tables and chairs that are in front of the small Jewel boxes. And it was actually, I think it was during COVID that we let them put additional tables. And one of the criteria is that you could not specify who sits there. So you didn't have, you didn't have to buy something at the restaurant to be able to sit there. So it was more or less open to anyone in the downtown. As far as having events there, that's not something that we have monitored, but if they're in the right-of-way, in the city's right-of-way, then there should be a permit that's given.
Well, my personal council member opinion is if that's a public sidewalk, then if we allow a business to use it for seating, good for them, good for us. But they don't get to tell us over our objection how they're going to use our sidewalks. And so if it's our public sidewalk and somebody wants to put a big screen TV on there, it's up to us to say we're okay with that or we're not okay with that, because it's our sidewalk. And it's unlike what it says here in the packet, that's not taking place on private property. That's taking place on public property that either we do or do not allow them to use.
Right. And so the way we handle that in general is that if it's a right-of-way, encroachment, you would have to go through Public Works. I don't think that we've had, if it's an actual event that's on the right-of-way, that should be something that's permitted as I guess, a special event. And when you go through that process, then you're also asking, Public Works, is this okay? Is this, blocking the sidewalk? You're looking at, the fire marshal then is involved too to look to make sure that there's no cords that shouldn't be there, that kind of thing.
Well, right away aside, I don't know that it's a walk-through where all the tables are.
Right.
But I do consider it a public sidewalk, not a private sidewalk where they can do what they would like to do.
Right.
And all of these businesses, they're great neighbors, they're good neighbors. I just think we've lost track of who owns what and who has the right to determine how those areas are being handled. I think with COVID, we were, very welcoming to these businesses, and I think we just, as we're going through what kind of events are we going to allow, it's, simply stated, if somebody thinks that's their private sidewalk, then they could say, well, I could put a big screen TV up if I want to. It's my sidewalk.
And it's not, most probably.
Okay.
It needs to go through a process just to make sure that it's safe, that people can still get around it, and, wheelchair, handicapped people, that also that it's, has the proper grounding for the wires, things like that.
Well, having said that, I think this is a good parameters to set up for our events on the town green and create some certainty and some guidance on how to handle them. And I can't be more complimentary of the businesses. They've always worked with the city. It's just, we're responsible for us. So,
right.
So thank you.
Councilman Binder.
I appreciate it. I had a question mark, 'cause I saw during the retreat, the line of questioning, it was specifically around Chiringa and their the big screen TVs. And I asked the same question, and I went another route, went through what's the agreement between City Center and there. So I don't know, Ms. Tracy, if you've seen the agreement and had the ability to look at it, because I saw some of the sections talking about the dining areas, which Chiringa does have one.
Right. Councilman Binder, I have seen this agreement. It's the covenants that are recorded. The covenants, conditions, restrictions, and easements for Alpharetta City Center. And I am aware that there's a diagram on a page that lays out what Councilman Hypes is referring to as the jewel box, structures there. And there is an outdoor dining area established on that illustration. And then there's another provision, and again, I have not done a deep dive into this 72 pages worth of covenants here, but there does seem to be a clear provision for what is and is not allowed in the outdoor dining area, which I know does specifically refer to audible speakers or other activities that create noise, and restricts the times that it can be in use, depending on what day of the week it is. And so I imagine that there is some application there with that provision, but I can give you that high-level version of it.
I mean, because I got 3 questions on that. Do we have authority? Second, is there a problem, which I'm seeing, can you pull that slide on what they were talking about, the TVs or whatever were? Yes. Is there a problem and 3 people had negative to it, and then, so is it, we have a solution in search of a problem, or I just generally what the issue is in there. Director Cook, in regards to other restaurants and outdoors, because I know I've seen it around Fetch. What's our policy for restaurants in their dining areas with having TVs?
Oh, there's no policy on the TVs. Now, the TVs, like there's one at Fetch.
Yeah.
And we had checked with our attorneys, too, to see if we could regulate those as we would for a sign. And there are no regulations that allow us to, classify it as a sign. That's how we would regulate if it's on private property. And we wanted to look, sign versus TV. And so TVs are basically exempt. Now, I think the TV, though, in question is on a stand versus something that's just kind of completely on private property.
Yeah.
Now, if the TV's in our right-of-way, that's different.
What, right away, and if we're subject to it according to the city center code, right?
Right.
Or what, the agreement? Right. So I would hope that it would fall under that policy there. I know it's gotten in the crawl. I mean, I was there, and I even don't know if I meant to mention it, but just in full transparency, I was there at the football game for Georgia's championship, and the talk between commercials was how a council member, I don't know who it was, approached one of the managers saying that they didn't like the TV there. So I don't want us to look like we're targeting. I would hope that we have a process in place for everybody in restaurants, and we can just go on that. I mean, when I had an issue, it was about the safe hotels. I did the legwork and did a policy full wide. So I just wouldn't want to appear that we're targeting one entity. But I don't know what the problem is if ever there's only three negatives.
Okay, so a lot of takeaways from this one. None of them have to do with what you were presenting about. But Mr. Lagerbloom, first, we need to clarify what's public right-of-way and what's sidewalk. The concern I have, and the problem isn't to the content, the problem is that as a government, if it's public right-of-way and we're allowing them or Mini Olivia or any other restaurant to utilize that, we can't regulate the content of that speech. And so whoever owns it and has the right to it. If there's an agreement, which I'm very skeptical of, that there's an agreement that says we'll allow people to put TVs in a public right-of-way in city center. We just need to clarify what is public right-of-way, what's private property, and once we figure out specifically who is responsible and owns it, whether it's the public or whether it's the private property owners, then we can act accordingly. I do believe a few years ago we passed something saying you can't obstruct our sidewalks. And that was an ordinance that we passed. And whether that's applicable to any vendor in city center or any restaurant on other sidewalks in downtown, we need to make sure that our enforcement and actions are not arbitrary, that we're consistent. And it doesn't have to do with content of the speech or the type of businesses utilizing. We need to know and be consistent in how we apply it regardless.
Mr. Mayor, and to piggyback on Binder. That was one I forgot too, was just the enforcement needs to be fair to all. Because I walk by Milton Avenue and there's retail shops where there's Adirondack chairs and TVs in front of the retail area for clothing. And I like it, makes it kooky and that, but if we're gonna apply the policy, we gotta apply it to all and everywhere. And I don't know if Parks and Recreation, man, I love Morgan being the director of fun, not being deputized as code enforcement. No offense, Morgan, but I like you to stay in your wheelhouse of fun and let enforcement be Director Cooks.
Yeah. And definitely, I mean, if we want to have the chairs, everything on Milton Avenue, as well as the extra tables removed that are in the right of way, we know what's in the right of way, and we can have those moved. It's just something that retailers and restaurants have added and haven't restricted them to their specific businesses. But yeah, I mean, we can certainly do that.
And I don't personally mind that. The only complaints I've heard is, well, it's taking away money from somebody else, but that's a capitalist thing, then figure out something else that makes people go to your restaurant. But
I do think there should be a process.
Yeah.
If they're going to have an event that has a big screen, it's just not something that we have in place, and I don't know if even Morgan has that in place. If somebody's doing a small event,
well, that goes back to the retail areas on Milton Avenue having every Saturday a TV to watch football.
Because without a permit in the right of way, code enforcement is supposed to tell you.
And that's one of the recommendations that I think we've just addressed, saying that a big screens on town green must be permitted. So, yeah, I guess we could expand that to all big screens must be permitted on public property.
I just want to remind all of the council and Mr. Mayor that, I think we have to be careful about talking about sidewalk ordinance generally versus what is provided for in these covenants. Additionally, with the outdoor dining areas, there is, it also addresses sidewalks and the encroachment area for which those merchants are, and I don't know the exact merchants that Councilman Binder's referring to, but I think it does speak to that directly in section 7.4 of these covenants.
Just so you're aware, I don't believe the shop he is talking about was in city center, so it wouldn't have been a party to any of those agreements.
Understood. Yeah.
Yeah, they have about 5 feet at city center. And this is outside.
And so this is for what's in city center. I think it's a 2-foot encroachment for these parties to this agreement.
So, Mr. Mayor, just in response to your suggestion, I think you're absolutely right on that we need to figure this out. And both the city attorney and I got this agreement earlier today, and I learned a long time ago, don't read one paragraph and think you know everything that's in the agreement, because it typically is dependent on other things in the agreement. So before we do a whole lot of speculation as to what's 2 feet and what's right of way and what's sidewalk, we'll get to the bottom of that, and we'll schedule this for a follow-up workshop. We'll bring that back to you.
Councilman Dorito?
I've been listening intently to the back and forth on this issue of the large screen television, however you define that. Am I missing something? Do we have an issue that we're not addressing? I mean, I'm trying to understand what the concern is.
Well, from my point of view, my concern is that we need to define what is public right-of-way, because we have responsibilities of how we deal with public right-of-way.
That I get, but
that's my only concern at this point.
It sounds like there's an underlying issue with the large screen TV or something, and that's what I'm trying to get a handle on. What am I missing an issue that?
I'm just responding to questions.
Councilman Mitchell?
This whole thing, I'm not sure where the problem is either, because I personally think if someone wants to have a big screen television out on our town green, and if they put it on the side of the building where that restaurant or whatever, let's say Chiringa, if they put it on that sidewalk there with the stand where it's facing City Green, and people want to come and enjoy an event there, more power to them. I mean, but if we're gonna get so regulated that we have to say, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, because you're in the public right of way. Then we're going to have to face all these other issues that are outside of city center, where they gather and watch the game, and they take up a lot of the sidewalk. And I'm personally like, that's a cool element in downtown, people sitting around in an outdoor living room like setting. I don't have a problem with it, but I also don't have a problem with a big screen television on the town green, because it invites people, and when you ride by, it looks appealing and attractive to folks, and it says, this city has a lot going on. So that's just my 2 cents on the matter. I don't want to get so regulated as a city that we just we take all the fun out of downtown when it should be a place people want to hang out and treat as their outdoor living room.
Any other questions or comments on this workshop item?
Is that what you wanted to hear, Director Morgan?
I'm sorry?
I said, is that what you want to hear? Did we give you enough direction? I'm just joking.
No. Well, I'm not going to answer it.
What do you need? What do you need to wrap up this workshop, Director Rogers?
And so I mean no disrespect, but the recommendations I brought forward were specifically directed at the town green.
Right.
And so, when we leave town green, then that's when I have to step back. So we're just looking right now to get a handle on the events that are happening at town green. So,
does anyone have any objections to the recommendations that Director Rogers brought forward? Councilman Binder.
Yeah, I believe I'm okay with everything except for recommendation number 2 for now. And if we're going to be, to your point, Mayor, if we're talking about right-of-way, then right-of-way in all of downtown, not just city center, that we open it up. And then which department scope of work is that? Is that a Parks and Rec thing or a Kathy or Pete thing?
Who did you want to answer that question?
No, I'm saying I'm okay with 1, 3, and 4 for now, moving forward with that. But from what I'm hearing, number 2, we need to have an understanding of authority and scope on that. Because if we're talking about right away, I don't think it should just be limited to the city center. Maybe just the downtown overlay. I mean, that's a discussion I'd be happy to have with council and staff.
Councilman Hypes.
Yeah, I like the proposals as presented. Pardon me. This says big screen on the town green must be permitted. And I agree with that. I don't believe any citizen without a permit should be allowed to roll out a big screen TV and put it on the town green, our public park, displace our families and our kids who would want to use it during that time, and then they decide to play MSNBC or Fox News or something. Because, again, going to the mayor's point, we can't control the content if we say you have unfettered access to use the town green, our public park, for a big screen TV. So I think the way you have worded it is appropriate. Big screen on town green must be permitted, in which case there's an application presented with some understanding of what the event is, when it's going to take place. But anyway, that's my 2 cents worth.
Any other comments? Councilman Mitchell.
And again, I have to concur with Jason. If we limit it on the town green, then we need to be fair throughout the city and limit it other places. And my whole thing is, why are we limiting it when there's only 3 people that were in the survey that had a negative view of it, and everything else was largely positive? Why are we doing this?
I don't think number 2, big screen on the town green must be permitted, is limiting it. Is simply making sure that all of the T's are crossed and I's are dotted if they were going to do something on the green. It's not limiting. We're not saying you can't do it. We just want it to be permitted so that we know what's happening. And the reason we did we called this one out was because we know that we've had quite a few of those on the town green, in and around the town green. So what's happening on the green, we just want to make sure it's permitted and that we are in control of it. We're, in no way are we trying to limit anything that's happening on the town green. We're just trying to get a control on it. So we can permit it.
But my whole point is a larger view about being consistent in the downtown, throughout the downtown, not just within the scope. And I understand this is within the scope of your area, the park-like setting. But what's to stop somebody from going to the green across the corner and putting up a screen there?
Councilman, if I may.
Sure.
The issue of amplified sound or erection of a big screen television within our parks in general, okay, which would include the one across the street, it include Will's Park, it include any park. These were rules that were adopted by mayor and council last year. Actually prohibits the use of amplified sound or the erection of stages, structures, things like large screen televisions, et cetera, absent a permit. So in all actuality, what Mr. Rogers is noting, right, which is just requiring a permit for that activity, is consistent with the park rules that have already been adopted.
I understand that, but it's not consistent throughout the downtown. And if one's not allowed in the downtown green, but yet you can have it on the sidewalk further down on Milton, it's not being consistent with our guidelines as a city, as a whole. And I understand what we've enacted for the town green. I get that. But it's not fair to, like the wine place that puts out, they have their own music, they take over the whole yard area. I like that. I don't mind that a bit. It encourages participation from our citizens. I don't even mind the living room with the large television on the sidewalk there. If people want to stop and watch the game, and most often they do, they'll do that. But how far do we want to go with this? I just think we're getting a little militant with it. Thank you.
If I could clarify, the sidewalks are not parks. What we're talking about is something that prohibits people from having large organized events in all of our parks if it takes amplified sound and video equipment, because it's consistent. We've had problems with that in the past. We had a huge issue at Wills Park when there was a political rally there, and that was the catalyst for making sure that that type of event didn't occur again. So people doing things on the sidewalk is a different process. What we're talking about now is permitting events on town green, because we aren't allowed to pick and choose who can do that. If we don't allow any events, we have to provide quality regardless of who it is or what the content is. So the point they're saying is everybody has to get a permit regardless. It's already our policy. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's the difference.
Again, I get the thing with the park. I understand the whole thing with the park, but I'm saying we have others that are setting up a television on the sidewalk as well. Do they have to get a permit? Are we going to come up with something so that we as a body can be consistent and where there's no differentiation around the downtown?
Councilman DeRito.
Thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate the mayor pointing out that we're talking about the town green, which is different from public sidewalks, I mean, as far as I'm concerned. So, but my question is, and I think you may have answered it, Mayor, it sounds like in all our parks, you have to have a permit to bring any sort of video equipment or loudspeakers, or is that correct? Is that?
You have to have a
So
permit.
don't we have that today for the town green?
Yes.
I mean,
So let me clarify. You have to have a permit to do something on town green.
Okay, so.
No matter what, in any of our parks, you have to have a permit.
So-
This particular recommendation was brought forward because mayor and council asked us to do a survey on the specific events that were held last year. Okay?
Understand.
So we did that, and these recommendations address each of those events, just those events that were there last year. and the one that was kind of the big screen was one of the events that was held. So we simply addressed that as the other events. It's the same thing with the city center concerts have to have a permit. Okay, all of those have to have a permit. The Cornhole Atlanta folks will have to get a permit. So everything that we do, and we were just calling out the city, the screen, because it was one of the events that y'all asked us to bring forward.
So my question is, if why focus on the big screen? Why not focus on the permit for the use of the town green, which would include video, audio, everything, like whatever you might have to use for that event, that goes through the permitting process. This is what we're going to bring, this is what we're going to do. To me, that's the way to handle it versus having, I'm not suggesting there's a separate permit from it. Maybe that's not what you're recommending, but it looks as though it's a separate permit if you want to have a large screen TV on the town green.
No, it would be the permit.
So it's already there in place, is my point.
Permit process for the big screen will be exactly the same as a concert, the concert series.
So you're just reacting to the comments from the retreat, I guess?
Absolutely.
So it's already there. So there's
You'll
nothing.
notice in those recommendations, there are no other events other than all the ones that we did the survey on, and all the ones that were talked about were addressed in those recommendations.
Okay.
And that was the point of our recommendations, was to address those events.
Councilman Binder.
On that note, I mean, I'd be open to having events on the town green need to be permitted as per park code, just so it's kind of redundant, and 10 years from now when somebody addresses, we don't have two sets of rules, and then that would take care of.
I don't think that's anything that needs to be clarified.
Well, yeah, that's why I was saying strike number 2.
Well, I mean, what it was asking us for input on is only allowing them twice a month. That's the input. Am I correct? The recommendation you made was to allow
for the concerts,
2 concerts a month and things like that.
No, he was specific to just the concerts on the town green, but then.
Right.
So, but then he was specific to big screen on the town green must be permitted, but just number 2, just making all events need to be permitted.
Or just leave it off because all of them are permitted.
Right.
Correct. That's why that was my original proposal, was just leaving it off. But I'm just trying to get so we can exit here, get off the ramp. Is if you guys need to have item number 2, just make it so town green events need to be permitted as per parks rules and procedures.
Mr. Rogers? Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. If y'all want us just to, I guess, so my question back is who's going to control the number of events that happen at Town Green? Because this is kind of giving y'all an indication of what is going to be coming this year to Town Green. And if you want us to start striking things off, then
I don't. I count the businesses. Councilmember Will said the more the better. It helps drive businesses. You saw it on the survey. I don't know what the problem is, but so on my perspective, sir.
I understand, and that's fine. So we're saying that they can have a big screen and a concert and anything else going on, because if we're not giving them any guidance on how we want to limit it, then all of this stuff can be going on at once, because he has no reason to.
These bullet points don't have the limiting authority here anyways, besides just the one on the concert should only be 2 Fridays. Everything else doesn't give a limit on frequency. So
I understand. So he's trying to get some insight on what they should permit.
Correct. And my insight is just
let her rip, man. Let everything go.
If that's what you heard, I'd be willing to hear what your proposal is. But
well, so I guess where my perspective has always come in is it's nice when businesses can take our public parks and monetize them. But it's my observation and experience that does displace other people using the park. And so striking a balance is what I always understood this exercise to be about. So I have no doubt there's no events going on the green tonight. and there's probably going to be some families out there. On other nights, there's going to be people enjoying music or a football game or whatever. But if there's no set of frequency, and there is frequency in all of these, well, not the last one, but it's, twice a month on the concerts. Cornhole is on Wednesdays, and trying to strike a balance so people with family and their kids can use it during parts of the week, but not just having somebody pull up a big screen and paying the permit fee, and then say, okay, this helps my, So I guess I'm in favor of some structure.
Yeah, and Councilmember Hypes, number 2 has no frequency. And so I don't, again, that's, okay. And then we were talking about sidewalks, and then we switched it back to Town Green.
No, excuse me, but we were talking about the Town Green, and the sidewalk got brought into the discussion, but this was a parks discussion about frequency of use of a public park, trying to balance out events. Rotary clubs use the park, special events use the park, the Alpharetta High School uses the park, but sometimes our residents just want to use the park without being displaced. And so I think that's kind of where we were trying to go with it.
Has no frequency.
Okay. Okay, well, if you want to go back to that, that's fine. But I mean, the sidewalk thing was introduced apart from where we were having a discussion, so far as I'm concerned. No, everybody.
As far as I'm concerned, I disagree, but
it's fine. So.
Councilman Mitchell.
To me, the problem with, and I'm not a big sports guy or whatever, but I mean, if there's a national football tournament, we didn't know we were going to be in this, and you can only have it on the first weekend. Well, that national game where we won the national championship recently, it's on the third weekend, the weekend that they didn't have. I would like to see some flexibility around the scheduling so that you could have the screen out there on a day when more people really want to watch the game. Does that make sense? If we have it so regulated that it's only the first and second weekend or third weekend, and we miss the big game, what's the point? I mean, the whole point is to entertain the crowd and do something exciting for the citizens. Is it not? I'm just saying, can it not have some flexibility at the Parks and Rec's discretion for those events that occur?
Director Rogers, it doesn't look like we're getting anywhere right now. Okay. So I would tell you that you have no direction. So either permit everything or use your discretion based on the policies that are in place. And we'll have to have another discussion when we have the full council present.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. So that'll wrap up the workshop items for this evening. Now's your chance for public comment. If there's anyone who would like to make a public comment, please come forward. Seeing none, close public comment. Any reports? Mr. Lagerblum.
Mr. Mayor, I do have one tonight, and it relates to the holding of our next election. So I wanted to update the council just as soon as we got the information from Fulton County that has some numbers attached to it, just so we can keep ourselves involved along the way so that we now have some deadlines to make decisions as to whether or not we want to choose to host our own election or we want to use the services of Fulton County. So very quickly, just to highlight, they indicate that they anticipate the general election to cost $5,720,000. That is countywide. And they anticipate that they will have Sandy Springs with no election, the city of Milton conducting their own election, I believe the city of Palmetto conducting their own election, and then in unincorporated Fulton, which still remains 552 voters, there won't be an election. So when you back out those voters, and it's important to have to back those out because when we start talking about what the costs are, it's per registered voter. So we know right off the bat that of the just shy of 900,000 registered voters in Fulton County, about 100,000 fall off because of those reasons I just articulated. So at that $5,720,000 price, we like to refer to what the cost per registered voter is. That equates to $7.66 per registered voter. To equate that to a number that you can digest would mean that our election in Alpharetta, since we would just have one in November, is on the books at this point at $379,408, $379,408. That's up from $146,700 the last time we had an election, when it was $2.96 per registered voter, with a delta of about $232,000, to give you some sense as to what it would cost to utilize Fulton County this year, comparing it to the last time we had an election. If you want to digest that, that's great. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't operating as a staff with information that you all didn't have as well, and didn't all have the opportunity to talk about collectively if you wanted to. There is a request by Fulton County that if we choose to use them, they've given us a deadline of March the 31st to execute the IGA and transmit it back to them so that they can then plan for the November election. So tomorrow being the 28th of February, we basically have a month, and that month equals 3 meetings to consider this IGA if you all wanted to consider it. So that's an update that I have for you. Happy to take questions such that I might know the answer, but we have to take a position in the next 3 meetings.
Councilman Hypes.
How long before we know what it would cost us to do our own election? Doing an apples to apples.
Yeah, so we're in the process of looking at that now. We don't have a lot of information we can go to other than to look at some other folks that have done that study. We have been meeting as North Fulton cities, and right now the cities of Alpharetta, Milton, Johns Creek, and Roswell are still in discussions about the idea of adopting an IGA amongst the parties. Right now the direction is looking more at hiring an elections consultant as opposed to hiring a joint superintendent, which you might have heard talked about. Part of that is because we feel as though somebody who's good at elections, who's done them before, would be more in a consulting role so that we would each have our own election superintendent. We have a couple of people taking that training so that if we decided we wanted to have our own election superintendent, we will have the right people with the right qualifications to be able to make that appointment. But that's where it's leaning right now. I don't have a cost for you, but I believe the cost would be, I use the word significantly, somewhat less than the $7.66 is probably a better calculation. Probably north of the $2.96, only because I'm not necessarily as conservative in the estimation as I've seen some of our other cities be. I'd like us to be a bit pragmatic with it, especially if we were to take it on in this first year, that we're going to learn some things in the first year that we probably get better at the second and third time we do it. But I think it is less than the 766, probably more than the 296, but I don't have a number for you yet.
Any other questions? Councilman Dorito?
Just, I don't know if this is a report, so I don't know if you want to schedule this for future discussion, or do you want us to ask questions? Because this is kind of an important topic, so.
It is. We just got some of this information within the past few days, and I wanted to give, hold on, let me finish.
Sorry.
When Mr. Lagerbloom explained that he had just come to find this information out about the deadline, he wanted to provide that information to council. I recommended we do that in public, so reports is the way it is. We can ask questions in reports. There is no vote. We're not making any decisions. But if you need more information to feel informed.
Schedule something in the future that will.
I'm sure we will.
Okay.
Once there's more to share, but I wanted to get this to you and the public as soon as possible. So there will be other opportunities. But if you have a question now, feel free. Councilman Dorito.
And Chris, I don't know if you can answer this. When you say the city taking on our elections, you're talking about just the municipal portion of the election, right? So I want the public to kind of understand that any federal, state election still is going to be, we're still going to pay Fulton County to operate those elections, correct?
That is, yes, that is correct, and we do need to be very clear about that.
So
this is only.
What I would like to see, as we go through our due diligence, is the cost comparisons of, you know, Fulton County continuing to support the federal and state elections, and maybe if there's a, oh God, excuse me, a follow-up election.
A runoff or?
Runoff, sorry. And we'll have to pay for that, right?
So the way that this IGA is written, and I'll send it around to you all, is that if one of our elections naturally occurs during a countywide, statewide, or national election, that we can allow Fulton County to continue to put that on, and that won't cost. That this is only for when we would have a municipal election that didn't coincide with one of their elections.
So I'd like to see the course model of if we only picked up that piece versus what we're paying today versus what we will pay in the future with those other elections as well that we'll have to put in the budget, right? Because I think you have to compare.
I think we can
the entire
do that
of elections versus just focusing on what we're saving for one municipal election.
You know, my initial reaction to that is we to some degree could control our own destiny there, that if we all of a sudden had a bond referendum, for example, that we wanted to bring forward, we could have it naturally coincide with a county election if we wanted to have it on a county ballot. These would simply be for those that I'll have to think through that, because I think we can pick and choose in some circumstances and not pick and choose in others.
There is, at least people have approached me, maybe the mayor and council members as well. There's a misunderstanding of Alpharetta taking over our elections. And I don't think it's been clear in the media or in discussions with the cities as to what we mean by taking over our own election, because it's not like we're basically throwing out Fulton County completely of running elections. It's only the municipal element, assuming we just have an election with just something that's municipal driven on the ballot, would it be a seat on this council or a bond referendum where there's no other state or federal question on the ballot, or a referendum of, state level on the ballot that voters have to consider, right? So I just think we need to consider the whole picture before making a decision to go down that path. I'm not saying I'm against it. Just want to make sure all the facts are clearly stated and that the public has an understanding of what we're about potentially ready to do.
Perfect. So why don't I do this just as a way to close this loop? I'll send this out to the elected officials. I'll send the IGA too, so you can read it and digest it at your leisure. It obviously will be discussed again, and we can talk individually and collectively as we move forward, as we come to some sort of a decision before the end of March.
Councilman Mitchell, did you have a question?
I do. Can you repeat the amount that they are proposing to charge us?
Yeah, so when you do the calculation based upon our registered voters, which are just north of 49,000 people, $7.66 per registered voter.
But what we had been paying is $146,700. So what are they proposing?
So we have paid in the past. The last time we had an election, we paid $2.96 per voter. And now they're proposing for us to pay $7.66 per registered voter.
I think we had fewer voters last time too, so lower amount and lower.
And is there any flexibility with us having fewer precincts for the local election?
If we were to
hold the county, I know there is if we do our own, but with the county, is there any flexibility there? It's like we have a ton of precincts.
I probably shouldn't assume that I know the answer to that, but I won't answer it because I don't know the answer, but I'll find out an answer.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions regarding this report? Okay. So we'll close reports, and I believe we do need an executive session, so I'll call for a motion for us to adjourn into executive session. I didn't make a motion. I was calling for one. Motion from Councilman Mitchell, second by Councilman Binder. All those in favor of adjourning into executive session, please vote yes. And it does pass unanimously.